Welcome to the Tangles and Tunes channel. My name is David, and today I'm happy to have you with me as we do a Zentangle tile. And today I'm going to be working on a standard 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch tile. And so let's get started. I'll zoom in here to make it a little easier for you to see what's going on. And I'm starting with this tile, and I'm going to create little dots in each corner, as we often do with the Zentangle method, just to get us started. And then I'm going to draw just a comfortable border just to sort of frame the image that we're going to be doing. These lines don't have to be perfect or exactly straight. In fact, you can do any way you want, but I just like to frame my drawing. And now let's divide the tile into a few sections to make it easier for us to work with. So I'm just going to find the approximate halfway point and just draw a line here and rotate the tile and do the same again at approximate halfway point. Now that we've got 4 sections, let's divide it once more. So each of these sections will divide in half. And then we'll rotate and divide it in half again in this other direction. And now, using these internal 4 squares here, let's create a rough approximation of a circle. Now, you can do it in 100 different ways, I'm sure, but I'm just going to kind of create an arc that connects these corners. You can see it's not a perfect circle. It's kind of making a little bit of a pointed tip there. So we're going to round this out here in a minute. I'm just using that to get us started, so we know approximately. And I'm actually going to use these variable lines to create a little bit of a centerpiece on my tile. And I'll show you here once we get inking. So let's go ahead and switch to our pen. And we're going to just create this circle here. And again, it does not have to be precise, perfectly round. We're just creating a centerpiece that's going to hold some of our tangles. Now, I said I was going to use those other lines, and that's exactly what I'm going to do to help alleviate the concern that some may have that, hey, my drawing does not look perfectly round, perfectly symmetrical. We're going to just create a few additional lines intentionally, but it also sort of covers up the fact that this is not a flawless circle. In fact, I'm going to do one more little set, varying the line dimensions, or not dimensions, but the gap between the lines, I should say, just a slight bit. Alright, so we've got kind of almost like a beginning of a spirograph looking thing. And now, with our orientation this way, I'm going to create a curved line that goes right here from this tip down to the center. And I'm going to flip the tile and do the exact same thing. A curved line goes down to the center. Almost like the proverbial yin and yang shape there, or start to it. So now I'm going to follow these same lines that we've just created and create some auras until I run out of space here, and you'll see exactly what I mean. We're going to connect them on the ends, but create a little gap in the centers there. And then we'll just turn the tile just to make it easier, hopefully. Although you can hold your tile in whichever way you find it easiest to draw. All right. Now, if you need to, you can touch up any of these edges to take away little hash mark looking things if that's how it came out where our lines didn't perfectly connect. I like to just sort of sculpt that a little bit to help correct that and darken that line. So now that we've got that, we're going to color in every alternating line. So I'm going to leave the first one white, or empty if you will, and then I'm going to just fill in the next one, the space between those other lines that we created. I'm just going to do that all the way across here, skipping every other space. I'm using an 01 pen, so it is quite fine pointed, so it takes a moment to fill this in. So I may speed up the video here to save you from having to stare at me doing this for all day. So now we've completed those alternating lines. Now we're going to do some small tangles in each of these two sections. The first one that we're going to do is a little mushroom looking thing, and I will put the names of these in the description list because sometimes my old brain doesn't remember what they are as I'm drawing. But we're just going to draw some shapes in here, so just follow how we do this tangle here, and we'll just fill this little centerpiece area. So I'm going to start a line right here, and I'm going to come up and just draw a little tip and come down, and then go over a little ways, do it again, and let's do one right there as well. And I'll just connect this right here to the outside. And now, to create that over and under or forward and behind sort of thing, we're going to do this same basic shape, but we're going to start behind and draw behind these existing ones. So we'll create one over here. That line comes out like that. Just like that. So now we've got some of our stems there. Now we're going to just draw tops of these little mushrooms that I mentioned a moment ago. And I'm going to draw the ones that are in front first to make sure that they are the ones that are easily viewed like they would be. And then we'll fill in the ones behind as best we can. So this one's going to just kind of peek in there. This one's going to come up like this. This one we should have plenty of room. And this one over here will kind of tuck in behind. So that's that old principle of drawing behind. Now we're going to add a few dots to these to make them a little more mushroom looking. Little spots on the mushroom caps, or at least like the fictional mushrooms look. And these don't have to go in any particular place. Just do 2 or 3 little spots depending on how much space you may have available on your drawing, because it may be different than mine, of course. And we just want to give these kind of that cool little mushroom look. At least that shape that when we look at it we immediately know, oh, that's a mushroom, or that's supposed to be some type of little mushroom. At least gives that impression in our little world here. As we always say with Zentangle, it's not representational artwork. It doesn't have to look like something, but sometimes it's fun to have a recognizable shape or some sort of pattern that is easy to create and that we immediately say, oh, that gives it that impression. Now what we're going to do here is create little tiny shadow marks to give that sense of realism with our pen along the side of these stems. So it's just going to be very, very subtle. Just little hash marks. And it's very, very subtle, but it can actually give some dimensionality to these little guys. So there we have like that. And now I'm just going to create a little bit of a bump here. And that looks pretty good. So now let's flip this over, and we're going to do the tangle in this other side. And so let's do this one. To me, it looks like a stalactite or a stalagmite. I forget always what that word is for the ones that grow on the floor. So what we're going to do is create some kind of squiggly lines in sort of an upside down V shape. And we'll just create a couple that would go in the front here, just like that. And now we'll do some in the background as well. So they're going to only see as much as what you can see there. That one just goes off the page. So let's create another one in here. One that goes up there. And maybe one even way in the background here. Like that. And how about one in here? There we go. So now we're going to do those same kinds of little hash marks. Whoops, I'm off the camera there. I apologize. We're going to do these hash marks along the side and kind of down to give that impression of an edge or dimensionality to these little shapes as well. And you notice I don't always put it right up to the edge. I want to create a little bit of a variety on how that shape may look. So we've got it like that. And now let's also fill in a little bit of black ink here. Where these that are behind, let's make these shadows a little bit, so you get the impression that it's actually behind something. Just kind of follow that where that shadow may go. And you can see it's very subtle. Giving a little bit of a boldness to those areas just so we can kind of get that impression of depth and that mark of a shadow. And in fact, let's do a little bit of that over here on these as well. There we go. All right. So now we've got the centerpiece, so to speak. So let's go ahead and do some background tangling in a grid fashion. So we're going to take this light squares that we drew with our pencil, and we're going to use that as a boundary or a guide for our grid pattern. So I'm going to trace the outside border. And now let's do those other lines that we drew with the pencil that divided the tile up. And we're just going to ink those in. All right, so now that we have that, go back to what I started to say a moment ago. We're going to draw some little squares at each of the intersections of this tile. Now this part, of course, I can't see it behind there, so I'm just going to draw part of it like that. And these don't have to be precisely the same size or dimensions. We're just creating this pattern that will follow along throughout the entire tile. And when we come to the edges here, we'll just do that partial one as well, since we can't see the other ones. Just like that. And we'll create these. And here in the corner, it would just be one little piece like that. So we've got all of those drawn onto our tile. So now in these lines here, we're going to draw a little curved line, a C shape or a seed. Some people refer to it as a seed shape. We're just going to start here, come out and go like that. And we're going to do it on each side, except of course, when we're on this edge, we're only going to do the one. because that's all we're seeing as far as that repeating pattern. All right, now we're going to draw it in this other direction, the same exact idea. Take your time, draw it as carefully and as smoothly as you'd like. Now that we've got that grid in the background, we're going to do one more thing. We're going to create a little X by connecting the corners of each of these squares in the tile. Okay, and just continue to do that for all of the squares in the grid. There we go. The basics of the tile are finished. So now we're going to move on to the section where we do our shading. So we're going to get our graphite pencil. Now, one thing we want to do is we want to create some shade and dimension on our little tangles here in the center. So we're going to create just a little bits of graphite at the point where shadows might live, so to speak. And we're going to just create little tiny tip of graphite there because we're going to spread that with our tortillon. And I'm going to do the same here on these little areas, especially those hidden areas, those overlapping areas. That's where we would want to see some kind of shadow, kind of where we created the ink. And I'm also going to do that along the baseline here and along the baseline here. All right, and so now I'll take my tortillon or paper stump. We're just going to add a little bit of smoothing to that to create a shadow instead of just a line of graphite there. And I know sometimes this doesn't always show up super well on the camera, but if you're doing it along with me there at home, you'll definitely see that shadow appear on the tile or on your paper if that's what you're using. Just enough to create some sense of, I'm actually going to rub just a tiny bit on these mushroom tops as well, just to make it look a little more dimensional. Now on these, on the background tile, there's a zillion different ways that we could shade this. But what I'd like to try is let's imagine, if you will, that one side is up and the other side is down. It doesn't really matter which. There is no up or down technically, but for this sake. And we want to add some graphite, not real heavy, but a nice chunk of graphite in that bottom triangle that we've created for all of these tiles, or all these squares. The bottom one. I'm just adding some scribbles here, and you'll see why in just a moment. Just adding enough where I've got some graphite to move around and to spread out inside these sections. Alright, so now that that's there, let's grab the tortillon again. And let's just sort of blend that into this bottom shape. Okay? Try to smooth it out so you're not seeing the lines anymore. So now what we want to do is do the same idea, but of a lighter shade, and lighter than the one we've already done, and we're going to do it right here. So we'll add a little bit, maybe a little bit less, and a little less dark, a little less hard pressing on it. And keep in mind your tortillon, as you use it, gets darkened on the tip there. And so that's the graphite that's already there is going to also lay down onto your paper if you don't already have some. But you can see I'm creating a lighter shade. It's not a dramatic difference, but there should be some difference. Now lastly, we're going to do the section straight across from there with even less. I'm almost leaving some of the whiteness showing through around the edges, not being quite as careful about filling the whole thing, the whole triangle shape. All right, now you should see the tonal differences there, but if you need to touch it up, I'm going to add a little more darkness to my dark ones. Just scribbling some graphite on top of this that I can smooth out. Whoops, made a little boo-boo there. I don't normally erase, but in this case I want to keep that piece white. Alright, so I want to add a little bit of that darkness here. And you can also use a softer pencil. Let's say instead of a 2H as I'm using, you could use a 3B or a 4B pencil, and that would have made that really dark. But you do have to be careful or be used to your pencils so you know just how dark it's going to become. And you know, if you want it to be really, really dark, or how much graphite you're going to have to lay down, etc. Alright, now I'm going to do the same here, just slightly darken up those right side pieces, just since it was hard to get that right the first time, so I'm just tweaking it a little bit as we go here. Just slightly darker. So it looks darker than the one on the left, but not as dark as the one on the bottom. So I'm going to go around the very outside of this little shape. I'm going to press kind of hard here just to create a darker line of graphite, and then I'm going to blend that out as well to create a little bit of a shadow that sort of makes that centerpiece stand out a little more off the top of our background grid. So I'm going to blend this now, but you want to be careful not to blend it out so far that you just create a mud pile on the rest of your drawing. So just do it nice and carefully around there, and blend it and smooth it a little bit so it looks less like a drawn line and more like a little bit of a shadow that's going to make that background pop off of there. Or I'm sorry, make that centerpiece pop off the background, I should say. One additional area of shading I want to do on this centerpiece is along these edges, or along the edges, I should say, of these patterns that we created with the dark ink. I'm going to do a little bit of shading in from each edge, which will make it appear a little more rounded or curved, and it just adds an interesting effect here. So we're just going to blend this a little bit in. Of course, it won't really cover onto the black areas that we've inked, and if you do too much graphite on that, it'll make those areas look shiny. So you want to avoid that if you can, but at least bring that graphite out a little bit onto the white areas, and you'll see that that shadow creates sort of a dimensional shape, a curvature to these two pieces. And now to accentuate that, if you have a white chalk pencil, you can add a little bit of like a highlight across the center here. Just give it a little rub there with your finger to smooth it in, if you don't have a separate tortillon just for that, because you don't want to put graphite there in the center. But just like that, and it creates a bit more of a dimensionality to this piece here. It looks curved, like it goes down into the shadows, recesses here, and then this is sort of the top point with a little bit of a highlight there. So that brings us to the end of today's Tangle, and I hope you enjoyed creating this tile with the grid and centerpiece on there. And just remember one important thing about Zentangle. Even though this looks like there's a lot of stuff going on here, we created it one line at a time. And that's really the heart of the Zentangle method. So again, thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great day.